Consider this an open letter to Andrew Scheer of the Conservative Party of Canada and an MP from Saskatchewan. In fact, the man actually was once leader of the CPC and led the party into an election that would have been Prime Minister had he been elected. Sir, you need to resign. Your tweet to Rachel Gilmore, who's an online journalist, former Global News journalist, is absolutely disgraceful. So, for those of you who don't know, a few days ago, Charlie Kirk, an extreme right-wing Christian nationalist activist in the United States, was shot and killed. He was assassinated. And it turned out, we didn't know who had done it for a while, and it turned out that it was a shooter from Utah who was actually far more right-wing than Charlie Kirk even more extreme. Wasn't a left-winger, wasn't a transgender person. It wasn't any of those things. It was a right-wing nutter, even crazier than Charlie Kirk. But here's what happened. Rachel Gilmore posted this video, and posted a tweet on X, and I'll read it to you. Terrified to think of how far right-wing fans of Kirk, aching for more violence, could very well turn this into an even more radicalizing moment. Will they now believe their fears have been proven right and feel they have a right to retaliate regardless of who actually was behind the initial shooting? Now, she was absolutely dogpiled on X, and people accused her of celebrating the Charlie Kirk's murder. And Andrew Scheer, right in the middle of it, put a target on her back in Canada. He is an elected representative. He is supposed to be held to the highest standards. Here's what he wrote. Imagine how twisted she, Rachel Gilmore, has to be that this is her first thought after a man was shot in the neck for expressing his views. So much hate in her. The irony of that statement is unbelievable. Charlie Kirk was a hate monger. I didn't know much about him, but I spent the last couple of days searching online, finding his comments. He was a Christian nationalist. He was a racist. He was all sorts of horrible things, associated with Donald Trump's MAGA culture down in the U.S. And he was a young guy. I think he was 31, and he was responsible for radicalizing a good part of the American youth. On behalf of Trump and the MAGA culture. And this guy was despicable. Let's not. This is not just expressing his views. And the fact that that's what Scheer thinks it is an indication, it implies that Scheer agrees with them. In fact, his boss, Pierre Poilievre, who's the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, said much the same thing in an interview. I mean, this is despicable. And for Scheer to target a journalist in this way and twist her words and misrepresent, because that's not what she said. She wasn't full of hate. What she was doing was warning that an assassination like this might kick off more right-wing violence, far-right extremist violence in the U.S. Amongst his supporters. And immediately after the shooting, there was a lot of speculation that, in fact, the shooter was a left-wing activist, a left-wing extremist. And so the fear was that the right-wing extremists would take up arms and go and retaliate. Perfectly reasonable comment for her to make on X. Now, one of the things that really bothers me about this story, and especially about Scheer's behavior, is that Gilmore was included on an atrocious website called Exposing Charlie's Murderers. In fact, at one point she was on the front of the page. She was first on the list. And so what this website is doing is collating a list, and they ask for submissions of anybody who was celebrating Charlie Kirk's murder. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if I was on there. I did a video the day of or the day after, I forget which one it was. Anyway, placing him within Professor Trish Roberts-Miller's authoritarian libertarianism framework. It's a bit of more of an academic spin to it, But nevertheless, no more, just about as innocuous as Rachel Gilmore's tweet. So we'll see. The site, you can't search the site right at the moment, so we'll see what happens. But anyway, here's the point. This is directed at a female journalist who has taken enormous abuse, online abuse. They threatened her with rape. They threatened her with murder. She's been doxxed. People know her address. She's rightfully terrified. And it's because, in part, maybe in large part, maybe entirely because she's a woman. And I want to tell you about a little experiment I did a couple of years ago. So there's a very well-known Edmonton person who, they're well-known on social media, and she put out a tweet, I think it was about COVID, and it attracted hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of really nasty, virulent responses. And she was flabbergasted. And so I DM'd her privately, and I said, I would like to propose an experiment. May I have permission to copy your tweet, word for word? I'll put it out as if it's my tweet. Let's see what kind of a response we get. 2. Maybe there was 3. It was 2 or 3. That's how many we got. I mean, really obnoxious ones. We got lots of positive ones. And, it started a debate on that thread and so on. But only a very, very tiny percentage, like 1% of the responses that she got that were negative. And part of it is because what the demographic that Charlie Kirk and Nick Fuentes and all of those despicable right-wing hate mongers in the U.S. is they target women. And they stir up all these young men, these incels, these groypers, who are angry and blame women for their lot in life, and they sick them on them online. And then these women get, DMs and posts and so on about her, threatening her. And, did we learn nothing about the whole bear in the forest? Whether a woman would prefer to be in a forest with a bear or a man, and most of them chose the bear. You can do this stuff. And it's one thing to admonish, if you're a private citizen, that's one thing. If you're an elected official who is supposed to be held to the highest standards of behavior in the land, and you did what Andrew Scheer does, you should be ashamed, sir. Ashamed. You should delete that tweet, and it's still up there because I just screenshot it for this video. It's still up there. Well, you should delete it, and you should publicly apologize. In fact, Gilmore has called for him to apologize. And so far, he hasn't responded, neither has Pierre Poilievre. But Canadians should. And I urge you, if you have a Twitter account, an X account, go find Andrew Scheer, Scheer, and tell him in no uncertain terms how outrageous his behavior is and how he needs to apologize to Rachel Gilmore. If we don't stand up for journalists now, if we don't, we know what happens in their right-wing populism, fascism, whatever you want to call it. They come for the media because the media are truth tellers. And that is the one thing they hate the most, truth tellers. And that's what Gilmore has done that got her into trouble. And that may be the source, the beginning of this, but it's taken on a life of its own, and it should not be amplified. But we should be pushing back against the Charlie Kirk lovers and their supporters. And instead, we've got our own elected officials, somebody who wanted to be Prime Minister of Canada, amplifying this message. And that is unacceptable, and we should tell him so. Please do it. Write him, email him, whatever you have to do. But express your disgust to Andrew Scheer and demand that he apologize to Rachel Gilmore.